So this next aspect that we're going to talk about is one of three that are seen as emotions that negatively impact performance. So these are things like anxiety, stress, burnout, etc. We're going to go through these, and the first one is anxiety. When we're working with ourselves as coaches and thinking of clients as well, we need to have this idea of how anxiety, we can move towards clarity so we can understand it and we can see where it's coming from. Now, this doesn't put you in a position of being a therapist in any way, but what it does have the ability to open up conversations with clients, which can be really powerful and support them in being able to move forward. And if you're feeling anxious, some of these things are going to be useful for you to maybe do as well if moments come, and you'll see what I mean as we move through this. So one of the strongest things that we can do to reduce anxiety is to anchor into the present and take action. So we don't have to necessarily refute the fact that we are feeling anxious about something. As human beings, it's naturally what we're going to have to do at some point, feel anxious about something or worry about something. And our clients are no different. But to be present in the moment of what's actually happening is really important, and then be able to take the necessary action that is required. And being able to have this conversation about, well, what's actually happening right now, what actions can you take, and then revisit and say, oh, okay, how do you feel now? Do you feel as anxious now? We have a plan, we know what we're doing, we're actually here in the moment. That is a very powerful position to be able to take. Anxiety thrives on imagined futures, and it is a state of anticipation, and it's sometimes a story that we build about something in the future that's not necessarily happened or may never happen. So we worry about a lot of things that never actually materialize. But for a coach, this chaos or this feeling of worry and concern can negatively affect your performance, and also can negatively affect the outcome of the client's journey as well. So its ability to be able to be present and then actually connect truly in the moment and not worry about the future overly can often prove more beneficial. And it's not about eliminating that anticipation, but it's about kind of using it as data and transforming it into awareness and something that can be, objectively analyzed. And anxiety, is this fear balance. So what does actually fear balance look like? Well, it's a cognitive imbalance, and it's where we often have an estimation of threat, and then we perceive the situation as more dangerous or negative than it actually is. But then that coincides with an underestimation of our ability to cope with it. So our own resources, self-efficacy, or how are we going to handle this particular incident that is potentially going to come up. So when we think about rebalancing this, it's the key, and it's the first part where we really need to be able to think about working with a client who might be a bit anxious about things, or if you're a bit anxious about things, it's about being able to see the rebalancing of the resources that you have and the demands that are at play. When we think about what that looks like on a frequency or on one of these graphs here, we have an idea. David Barlow described anxiety as a misfiring alarm system. So we know about fight or flight or freeze, but in essence, we're thinking more about the fight or flight side of things, and it can be triggered at inappropriate times. And this is essentially the alarm system going off. Now, you see here where it's misfiring, and you have this kind of very staccato, very uneven, very unsure of what's going to be coming up next. Whereas when we train the mind to think a little bit more, you accept that there's going to be ups and downs, and it's more about the smoothing out of those and going, well, I feel a bit anxious. What does that mean to me now? And then being able to rise out of that into a place of more emotional stability, and ways in which you can immediately anchor into the present moment, which is a very powerful thing to be able to do, and they are very useful in the right time, in the right place. So out of the waves and onto the shore, if we think about being in obviously a tumultuous kind of wave situation and then coming out onto a calm shore, a way in which you can do that is grounding exercises, naming 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste, for example, brings around a very sequential grounding process, and it pulls your attention away from what you're imagining in the future, and it brings it firmly into the present moment of what you're actually sensing and what you're actually feeling, and immediately has a calming and a smoothing out of those waves that we saw in the previous graph. The idea of almost like an affirmation to be able to level out anxiety and reduce it somewhat is right now I'm safe, right now I'm capable, and right now I can choose to respond. And that is a very grounding affirmation by using those words, you can bring around a certain sense of equilibrium. We do need to forge the internal anchor. It's all very well having various different things that we can lean into, skills that we can use, which is great, but ultimately there is an almost internal need for the belief that you can navigate times when you feel anxious, when they come up, or when your clients feel anxious, by installing that within them. So, what is the fear or what is the belief that is fueling anxiety most often? It's about finding that source. So, is it a belief of not being prepared, an assumption of what will others think? Various different things could be fueling anxiety, but identifying what it is very important. And once that specific source is named, then it can begin the process of exploring how you might want to disarm it. So challenging what that threat is, how realistic is it, what are the objective evidence for or against it, and this is more like cognitive reframing, which can really bring around a shift in perspective quite quickly. Accessing that power, what resources do I actually have, internal or external, that I can counter that feeling of the challenge and what is bringing out. Once that's in play, you can start to shift where your state is. So make that conscious choice to change the focus, anchor with the breath. Box breathing as well is a very good way, and then anchoring the movement, and whatever that might be for the individual can be appropriate. It could be going for a run, stretching, walking, could be lifting weights. It doesn't really matter what it is, but there is that movement element, there is that breath element, and there is that focus element. So a very cognitive and a very physical and a very somatic kind of three-pronged approach to being able to deal with the anxiety that might be coming up. Remember that calm is not in the absence of anxiety, but in the skill of staying anchored within it and moving through it and understanding what it's there and what it's telling us. So have a look at that task and get you into that a little bit and see how you feel. And then we'll see you at the next one.